guide me with your counsel, and afterward you will take me into glory, says Psalm 73:24. Good morning and welcome to the Good News on Business at Tandem Radio Live. We're here with you again, as we are every Saturday, talking to you about God's good news and how it applies to your business on a daily basis. And, of course, the theme of our show is different each week, but the concept is the same, and that is to help people walk in integrity and make them realize that God wants to be in your business life just like He wants to be in the rest of your life, and that you can take the wisdom that He has in Scripture and apply it to your everyday life, especially in your business. And I know I found that decision-making and so forth, including God in, just brings so much benefit to what you do. As we do each week, we bring in special guests, and this week our theme for the show is Building with Integrity. And we have David and Jason Bossart. They're builders and owners of Bossart Builders. And we're going to talk more about that and with them in a minute or two. Our goal is to talk a little bit about construction, talk a little about business, talk about building churches and some other things. And most importantly, our goal is to glorify God. And secondly, to give you something that you can use in your business. As many of you know, this show's about business, and my background has been that my family tells me I started my first business when I was 7 years old, and since then owned a number of different businesses, and been in consulting as well, and worked with big and large companies alike, and just have fun working with people, and especially developing businesses. And of course, the Lord's led me and put some things on my heart, and here I am, the Bridge stations, all 6 Bridge stations, and of course live on the internet and through our app on the iPhone and also on the Droid as well. So many people listening out there, I want to welcome not only our regional listeners, but our national and our global listeners as well. It's always exciting to get emails from across the country and even the ones that come from outside the country. And we'll talk more about how to connect with us and how we can get you advice. I'm praying for Maria and Jimmy today. They sent me an email last week, and we sent them a response. Hopefully we helped them with their business, and many other people who send emails. Not only do we do our best to get you good answers, but we also pray for you as well. So we'll tell you more about that in a few. So again, our show theme today is Building with Integrity. And as we do each week, God puts some scriptures on my heart, and I'll read those scriptures. They come to me, and I put them on the air. And sometimes I read them, and I say, boy, that's right on what we're talking about today. And sometimes I'll read them, and I'll say, what does that have to do with today's show, God? But He always ties them together, and that's what makes it work, right? So let's see what He has in store for us today. Exodus 31:6. Moreover, I have appointed Oholiab, I'm not good with the names, son of Ashimach of the tribe of Dan, to help him. Also, I have given abilities to all the skilled workers to make everything I have commanded. Psalm 127:1. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builder labors in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. And lastly, Matthew 24:1-2. Jesus left the temple and was walking away when His disciples came up to Him to call His attention to its buildings. Do you see all these things? He asked. Truly I tell you, this is Jesus speaking, truly I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. Well, we're going to start with the opposite of that. Instead of throwing them down, we're going to build them up. And we have a father and son team that, it's kind of funny because for years I've been wanting to meet these gentlemen, and we were at a pastor's conference together and ran into each other, and God has a way of weaving people together, and I'm so glad that we were able to connect, because David and Jason Bossart have a great name in the building industry, and they focus on churches, which is exciting to me. And one of my companies, one of the more successful ones, focuses a lot on churches as well, so we have some commonality there. But these are a father and son team that have been working together for a long time, and we want to introduce them to you today. So David, Jason, welcome.
Good morning.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, as we do each week, we want to start off with you gentlemen telling our audience a little bit about yourself so you can get a little feel for your background, and then we're going to get into some thoughts about your business and how that may relate to our audience. So, David, let's start with you because you started the company. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, actually, we go back to the last real estate crash, early 90s. And I had been developing and building all types of properties, strip centers and self-storage, industrial buildings, office condos, and everything came to a halt in the early 90s, as some people may recall. And I was asking the Lord, how am I going to go forward? What am I going to use all my background experience for? And He opened the door. It was actually a former pastor of our church that was working with a company up in upstate New York that designed and panelized church buildings throughout the Northeast. And he said they were looking for a commercial builder to represent them in New Jersey. And I said, I'm willing to do that. And from that point, we got involved with designing and building mostly churches. So about 90% of our work now are churches. We do some affordable housing and some educational facility building as well.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned the 90s, because I remember in the 80s, when I go out and speak, a lot of times I'll use this as an example. I'll tell them, in the 80s, you could trip over yourself and make money. I mean, right? It was great. And then in the 90s, that's where I got my sense of humor from, because everything died in the 90s, right? So it's funny that you brought that up. I haven't remembered that in a long time. But, yeah, it goes and comes, right? But we stay through, right?
So it was about 7, 8 years ago that my son decided to join me, even though he saw me go through those difficult times. And again, it looks like the last 2-3 years have proven that the cycles are always going to be there. Right. And he has picked up the ball.
That's great. That's great. So, Jason, tell us then a little bit about how your background, and then we'll talk more about getting into your business and how you guys got together.
Well, sure. As we said, having been a child during that time, the last real estate crash, I promised myself I would never become a builder, and wanted to do basically the exact opposite type of thing. But strangely enough, I was called back 8 years ago God has opened a lot of doors and closed a lot of doors in my life, and a door swung open to come back to New Jersey, have a blessing of working with my father, and ultimately helping to expand the kingdom by creating facilities for churches that are really looking to expand their ministries in various communities. So it really has been something that I faithfully believe has been ordained by God for me to be doing this as well.
That's powerful, because I have a heart for what you're doing, because I know it's very unique, building churches, and it's fine. My pastor said to me all the time, he says, it's a ministry for you. You're out there building churches. Of course, I'm working on the sound, so that's a small part of it, but you're working in building the whole facility, and it is a ministry. And we're going to talk about both sides of that, talking about from your perspective and from the church's perspective, which I think is important. But my pastor always reminds me that he says, how you doing? How you doing with the business? Because he knows that sometimes bad experiences, right, can kind of harden your heart, and he always says to me, don't let your heart get hardened, no matter what's going on in the business. Make sure that your heart's still soft and pliable to God. And we hope that that's a good tip for business owners out there for sure. So let's talk about a little bit about your business and how you got where you are today from a business perspective and starting. So you talked about how you got into it, Dave, and why that turned in the 90s and you decided to get into this. Why construction in general, though? I mean, obviously you went to school for engineering, you mentioned before, and what got you like a real zeal for construction?
Well, it was actually my last year of college. I was a 5-year engineer at Rutgers, and I knew that wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. And the Lord opened the door. I started selling real estate, and was just fascinated with the whole profession of real estate. And, of course, construction is part of that, developing and building. And that was where my heart really was. And I pursued that. I've had a background in all kinds of commercial brokerage, appraising, developing both residential and commercial properties. And really, for a number of years, was pursuing that profession more for my own glory rather than the Lord's. And I think that the early crash of 1990 showed me that the Lord said, well, you're going to build for me now.
There you go.
You're not going to build for your own account. I literally went from a net worth of $4 million to negative $4 million in 18 months.
Wow.
And that was a lesson that the Lord wanted to teach me. And from that point on, I've really dedicated my profession to Him and His glory. And He just opened the doors, to that. We probably are one of the most active church builders in New Jersey now, and I've built over 50 churches over this time span.
Amazing. And Jason, you mentioned that you traveled around the country and you did some things, and I relate, because my father had a very large dry cleaning business, and when I was able to drive, all I could think of was, I'm not doing the dry cleaning business. And of course, in retrospect, you always look back and say, if I knew then what I knew now, right? So you went around a little bit. Tell us a little bit about that. What brought you back to construction?
Well, I went to college in Washington, D.C. at George Washington University,
Oh, okay.
and I really had a passion for politics, really wanted to get into politics, wanted to go to law school and go that route. But after I'd spent my 4 years there, and even a year afterwards, I started looking around and saying, well, I don't know very many happy lawyers,
Right.
and it just didn't seem like a thing that I could deal with. So I tried my hand at a few different things, some sales and marketing that brought me kind of all over the place. But I knew that I had been given some ability to communicate with people and to basically deal with people where they're at. And the construction industry is not just building a building, but it's also about relationship building.
Every day, right?
And basically taking people through a very, very difficult time or a stressful time in the life of the church.
Right.
And so, for whatever reason, those gifts that I might have been given have helped that way. Where I might not be the best person to tell you how to exactly build something, I can at least communicate and we can go through it together.
Right, right.
And so that's why I feel that it's I was placed here to do this.
Amen. Well, it's so good to know that you have a calling and that you're answering that calling. That's what makes it so much more doable, right? I mean, that's allows you to get up every morning and feel good about what you're doing. You're listening to Tandem Radio Live. This is your host, Glen, here every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And just want to let you know out there that we have a lot more to talk about with David and Jason. And we have a lot of details that if you're a business owner out there, you're going to want to take notes today and take some information home with you. Don't take those notes if you're driving, of course, but we're going to give you some stuff that you can take home and use at work on Monday morning as well. But don't forget, tandemradio.com is a place for information and help and all types of contacts. You can even see our archive shows there. I mean, see them. You can see them on video as well and see what we're doing and how we're doing it here. But if you have questions or you'd like more info at tandemradio.com. That's INFO at tandemradio.com. That's how you'll find us and send us information. We'll be glad to answer your emails, get you some advice, and most importantly, pray about your business. So stay tuned. We got a lot more after these sponsor messages, and we're going to be right back with the Bossarts and building. Well, welcome back to Tandem Radio Live, where our title for the show today is Building with Integrity. And it's an important topic, and we're going to talk to further with David and Jason Bossart, who are the owners of Bossart Builders. And we have a lot of insights for you in that area. Again, going back to the scriptures for today, as we do each week, Exodus 31:6. Moreover, I have appointed Aholiab, son of Ashimach, of the tribe of Dan, to help him. Also, I have given ability to all the skilled workers to make everything I have commanded you. Second, Psalm 127:1. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builder labors in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. Matthew 24:1-2. Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. Do you see all these things? They said. Truly I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. So we're talking about building today, and I think those scriptures tie in pretty well, and we'll touch on that later. But let's start digging into actually what you're doing on a daily basis. So David, let's start with why churches. What was your, well, let me go back for a second. You're contractors, right? And I know this will be the tough question of the day, okay? So we've all had some experience, most people have had some experience with contractors, a lot of times not such a good experience. I know a lot of times it's like you mentioned before, Jason, it's a struggle, it's a difficult time for people, it's always stressful. I was on a construction site yesterday and we had a big project meeting I got a call 2 o'clock the day before, so you got to be here at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'm sure you get a lot of those. Let's talk about that for a minute. What about the integrity in your industry? Jason, let's start with you. What are you hearing or seeing that allows you to step away from that negative perspective and give maybe a little bit of peace to people as your process goes through?
Well, the method that we've adopted to build is a construction management model. And that's really what that does is it establishes a relationship with our client right from the start. We're actually their advocate. So we have an open bid process where we go out for bidding for projects for contractors. We get recommendations. We show them those things. We discuss them. We don't mark things up. We don't work on that kind of way where we're getting money back from contractors.
Okay.
And so we establish a trust right from the very beginning because it is a business that unfortunately It's got a bad reputation in terms of contractors, and a lot of it is merited. So we make sure that we establish communication and trust from the very beginning. The other thing that we think is very, very important, I just happened to finish up being president of the Community Builders and Remodelers Association of New Jersey this past in 2011, and we think that being aligned with an organization or a statewide association, really, of 1,000-member companies gives us both credibility, but it also holds us to a higher standard because we represent something that's just not only our company, but something larger than ourselves in an industry that does really help people, whether it's a home, whether it's a house of worship, or if you need to build a dry cleaning business. We definitely make sure that we have accountability there as well. And I think that shows through with our clients. And then, things don't always go well. You have those emergency meetings at 2 o'clock the next day where you have to, circle the wagons. But if you have that open line of communication and you tell it how it is to your client, it establishes trust, and it eases the burden of the entire project.
Now, David, how do you give the client that comfort level going in? Because obviously, there's 3 or 4 other guys coming in and saying, hey, we'll build your church, How do you differentiate yourself and your company when you're face-to-face with the client?
Well, actually, with this model, construction management, we're coming in earlier to help the church plan and design what they want to build, what they need for their ministry. So we're not just trying to give them any old building. We want to give them something that's going to help their ministry grow. And that's a key factor there for pastors to know that this tool that God's going to ultimately give me is going to help reach people for Him. We're actually building in New Jersey for 20 to 30% below the market.
Oh, really?
With this program, and the reason being, we act as direct consultants, construction managers for the church. When we go to the planning board, and the planning board is asking for unreasonable site improvements, we're there. We know the cost. We know the factor. An attorney may not know that. He may agree to anything to get approval, but we're there to hold the church's hand through every part of this process to make sure they don't step and go down the wrong path.
That's so important. I mean, obviously you guys are out there building relationships because it has to be a long-term relationship, right? So you're getting across these people right up front that you have that integrity level in what you're doing.
Well, it's also really, if I could jump in for a second,
Sure.
It's aside from the just the nuts and bolts of building and drawing up plans, when you're able to distinguish yourself from perhaps 3 or 4 other bidders by meeting the church where they're at, but understanding the tremendous leap of faith that they are about to take, and to guide them through that because it's what we do. It gives them a level of comfort because they say, okay, these guys have done this before. Because a church is not like any other building you're going to build, and even more specifically, you're not building for a husband and a wife, building for 400,000 people, all with opinions and ideas of how things should be done. So you're definitely managing expectations and helping them to take this leap.
I hear you. Now, you had mentioned about associations. Let's talk about that for a second because I know both of you won awards and you're involved with different organizations. Just tell us briefly about that, some of your interfaces with, some of the awards you won and some of your interfaces with these associations. Dave, you want to start?
Yeah, I've been a member of the Builders Association, which is the Community Builders Association of North Jersey. Also is part of the New Jersey Builders Association, part of the National Association of Home Builders since 1978, a long time. And that has always been a source of education and knowledge for me to increase my profession and my ability to help my client. So it's been invaluable. I had served as the local president back in '88, and I'm so proud that my son has followed in that footsteps after all those years. Really never, foresaw that because he, like he said, he did not want to go in this business in the ups and downs. But his skills as a communicator have been invaluable, and he's helped not only our business and the ministry and also the Builders Association as a whole. And this past year, he has been named Builder of the Year, and I'm very proud of that.
That is exciting. And Jason, tell us a little about that and maybe some of the other awards or associations you might be involved in.
Well, I think focus of this show is how to help people run their business. And we find it, as my father said, to align yourself with an association, to have that credibility, to get that educational, to continue to learn, to realize that you might not be the best at what you do and always strive to get better, would help anybody's business. Whether you're an accountant and you're part of their association, it brings that level of it just brings the level of your game to a new height.
Right.
We've won a few awards. We've been blessed to do that. It's a testament to the churches that have, again, stepped out on a leap of faith to expand their ministry. Some of those awards would be the Princeton Presbyterian Church, with a very, very large sanctuary that turned out stunningly beautiful. We've won awards for a community center down in Pleasantville, Mount Zion Baptist Church. We've been blessed that way, that people have, in a secular world, have taken a look at some of our projects and said, these are pretty noteworthy.
Right.
But more importantly, these particular places that have won awards have all, and I say this about the church in Rockaway, New Jersey that we did, Princeton Presbyterian and the Mount Zion Church, have all, those three in particular, have opened their doors to the community, to invite schools in, to have performances. They've turned it into performing arts centers. So not only have they won awards for their building that they chose to build, but they've really answered the call of reaching out to the lost, and that's special.
Well, I know you're focused on churches, and it must be very rewarding to see the buildings used for all those mixed uses. Do you are you dealing with many people outside the church world?
Yes, we have built affordable housing. We work for Homeless Solutions. We built a number of units for them. They were building what they run a homeless shelter in Morris County, but they were looking to build transitional housing. So the people that they would work with, that ultimately they would find them a job and they would get them their first apartment after that crisis. And we built units for them. We employed a lot of green building techniques, solar. All the common electric in that project was run by photovoltaic. And we're working right now with a church that's looking to build veteran housing, specifically for disabled veterans.
Oh, yeah.
And that, again, they feel that they've been called by God to do this, to serve, have a new ministry, and that's actually providing affordable housing, which has been a crisis situation in New Jersey for many years.
Right. Yeah, that has been, and I see that with my father-in-law, for example, who's he's up there in years, and it's hard to find places where they can live. Like we live in a town that's fairly affluent, so for me to try to find him an apartment or something small in our town, it's next to impossible. And then when you do find things that are affordable, you usually don't want to live in those areas. So it's great that you're working on those things. We have so much more to cover. I want to talk about innovations in construction. I want to talk about green. You mentioned green, and I'd like to talk about some of your unique projects in the next segment, and maybe we can get our audience wrapped around some of those things that I think they'll be pretty excited about. You're listening to Tandem Radio Live, and we're here every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. And again, I just want to point to tandemradio.com. There's a lot there. There's of course, our sponsors are listed there, and all our sponsors are good Christian businesses that are committed to integrity, or we wouldn't have them as sponsors. We also have a lot of our archive shows there, so you can look up titles and see if there's something that you're having a challenge with in your business specifically, and you can look up that show and watch either a segment or the whole show. And you can also email us there, and we'll do our best to get back to you, as we often do. And I know many of you are listening have sent in your emails with questions and concerns about your businesses, and we will do our best to either answer those questions or get someone who we know that can help you to answer those questions. And most importantly, we'll pray for you as well over your questions. And we're excited to have you check out tandemradio.com. And again, emails to info@tandemradio.com, info@tandemradio.com. We'll be back just in a couple of minutes, so stay close. Welcome back to Tandem Radio Live. I'm Glen, your host here every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're here with our guests, David and Jason Bossart. By the way, their website is bossartbuilders.com. That's BOSSART builders.com, and you can find out more information about them, of course, at our link at tandemradio.com. And they're here talking to us about building, construction, and churches. They're focused on churches, which is unique. Jason, earlier you brought up the comment about relationships and how important it is, and how you get your relationship across and your integrity across, and that's important. Let's talk about the other side of the fence, right? Relationships are a two-way street. There's always times when they're stressful, and there's times when maybe you're not so happy with what's coming back to you. And I know in my business, it's especially because you kind of try to hold churches to a higher standard, thinking they're going to deal with you in a little bit different way than most people, right? You think, but then God's very clear in His Scripture that's not always the case, right? So I don't want to go into pharisaical issues, but let's talk about times when maybe you were disappointed in the relationship. How do you handle that from? Again, you don't have to be specific on the issues, but how do you handle that from your heart basis? Because obviously this is a business that comes from the heart for you.
Well, obviously in business you've got wonderful clients to work for, and you've got ones that when the project is over, you hand them the keys, and you're happy to walk away.
I hear you.
You are dealing with, in our business, predominantly we are dealing with Christian people, but we're also dealing with human people. And in construction, you see people at their best when they're most excited, and you see people at their worst. Right. And things don't always go smoothly. And so when we put our heart and soul into a project, because we do, and perhaps that doesn't resonate with a particular church, it's disappointing. Right. But we have to remember that we're not so much building the church for that individual, but we're building it to expand the kingdom. And we try to maintain a site where the contractors are respectful, and they have a lot of interaction with the church. And the best compliment I like to tell the churches is when our contractors come up to us at the end and say, you know what, this is the kind of church that I can attend, because these people have a solid heart. And that's great. So I try to focus on the good ones, but understanding that we are dealing, again, with the human condition in many ways. I'm not perfect, and churches aren't perfect either. And as long as you understand that, but you always look for resolution and to try to do your very hardest to leave on a very positive note.
And David, do you have a perspective on this? Again, we go into these situations sometimes. Let me ask you this, maybe a little bit different angle. When I go into churches, I'm almost sometimes anxious to let them know that I'm a Christian, but of course, I don't play the Christian card to get my business, and I'm sure you don't either. How does your faith impact your business on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I think when we present our method of working with them, more as their advocate, everything is open book. They realize that we're not just in it for a profit, but we're also in it to help them expand their ministry. Right. We are very cognizant of design trends, of green building techniques, everything that will give them a better, more functional building. And when they see that we're up on the technology, I think they also gain more trust that we are the professional that can help them achieve their goal.
And I'm glad you mentioned the word profit, because business owners, I just want to make sure they heard that word, because we are in business for a profit. And I know some of the most disappointing times I've run into with people that I've seen get bad experience with church, because as a deacon in my church, you hear all kinds of stuff, is when someone goes in and doesn't make a profit, right? And you do it and you lose money on the deal. That always sours your relationship too. And people don't realize it's a two-way street. I was in a church the other day that had somebody in their congregation do the sound system. It was disastrous. I mean, I couldn't talk about unethical. It was amazing. But more importantly, the relationship was destroyed. The guy who did it for them for free, supposedly, is gone. So as a church, I mean, I'm just throwing out there, churches, be wary. I mean, you should not be afraid of bringing someone in who's going to make a profit. Not that they need to overdo it, but everybody needs a fair profit. It even says that in Scripture. Realize that, to a certain degree you get what you pay for, but more importantly, if someone's stressed out coming into it knowing they're not going to make any money doing it, it's not usually going to be a good relationship. But do you usually find that, David?
You touched on something interesting, because many churches will want to save money by using some of their members. And in some cases it can work, but oftentimes it's like building for family. Both you think you're doing a favor for each other. Right. And we very carefully manage any kind of donated labor or material to make sure that the end result is a professional job. Right. So that has been a challenge over the last few years.
I'm glad you brought that up as well, that you focused on that, because it is an important thing, and we see it especially in the domain of churches, that there's always somebody I got someone in the congregation that'll do that. And especially in my industry, I'm always amazed, because I usually will touch base with the church a year later just to follow up, and I almost always find out that they weren't happy, And again, I don't think they go into it with a malicious thought. They go into it thinking, like you said, you hit the nail on the head, that both sides are given here, and church is doing them a favor by giving them the work, and the guy's doing a favor. But it usually ends up in a sour note, right, Jason?
No, that's absolutely true. And, when you're dealing with building churches, we understand that every dollar has to be stretched infinitely farther than a person building their own $5 million custom home,
right,
where money is no object. Right. And so, as you said, it's the best intentions going in. And I would say that to anybody that runs a business dealing with churches, make sure that you're always very upfront about expectations of any donated labor. That jobs have to be treated as a actual full-time job. Don't underbid it just to say you're doing a favor, because it does end up with hurt feelings at the end. And ultimately, when you have a lot of people that have volunteers that have major components of a building,
right,
they end up usurping the construction manager's control of a project,
right,
and cause friction between us and our client that we've worked so hard to create that relationship with. So it's important.
Sure, I agree. Let's go back to innovations, because we touched on it. You mentioned green a couple of times, David. Obviously, construction industry especially, you got to keep up on all the latest and all the greatest. Let's talk first off about green, and then maybe we'll talk about some specific projects that you have done. You brought it up, David, so let's start with you. Let's talk about green. What do you do for a church to make it green?
Well, first of all, I have taken a number of courses through the National Association of Home Builders, a number of their courses on green construction, and have actually obtained their certification. I'm a certified green professional in the field.
You don't look green to me.
And but we look at this on a feasibility, a financial and physical feasibility basis, to make sure that we're not spending dollars that may not be recovered. Not all green can be recoverable in a reasonable number of years.
Right.
So we look at the numbers. We do all this in conjunction with our value engineering. Every project we look at, the ones that have already been designed by an architect, many times need to be value engineered so that we can do things better, at a better price, with better quality, and at a lower cost.
Let me just say that churches oftentimes, just like many businesses, and I'll give you an example in a minute, they don't tend to start small with going green. Right away they want to know about the geothermal, which is it's feasible based on what type of land you have.
Right.
Or solar panels, well, that's based on what type of roof you have and what type of exposure you have. All great things.
Right.
But, people don't realize that by building in wood out of steel. Wood is a green product as compared to steel, because it's a renewable resource.
Right.
It's also a better insulator, so you're saving money on heat and cooling the facility. So you start small. I went by a building on the way here this morning, and it's a bank, and I've watched it being built over the past few months. It's a small bank, and it says so-and-so bank is going green. And they're using all of this different steel and all these products that are not a new renewable resource. And I said, what part of this is actually green? Maybe the one solar panel they're going to put on top that runs the parking lot lights.
Right.
So you can start small and have an impact. Because, as I said earlier, with every dollar at a church needing to be stretched further, green technology, although it's come a long way, is still relatively expensive right now.
Right.
And it takes some time to recoup that value.
Yeah.
So we do a cost-to-benefit analysis for churches that way.
That's important, because everybody's got their idea of what green is. I remember my son goes to American University down in D.C. Well, he just graduated, but I remember going through orientation, and the president was so big on that they were building a new building. It was totally green. And he was going on, and so I went up to him after the presentation. I said, so you're really hyped about the green. So this architect is the green guy. I said, so basically you're telling us we can just about eat anything that this building's made out of, right? And so people go really crazy for this green.
And they sometimes miss the simplest,
right,
miss the vote of the simplest issue.
So that's cool. Real quick, because we're almost up to the break. Real quick, what's a unique project that you can think of, or either one of you, that jumps out at you as one of your most unique projects?
Well, we just finished the First Assembly of God in Rockaway. Just changed their name to Rockaway Assembly of God. Very interesting project, simply because as we just began the project, it was supposed to be in addition to the 50-year-old church that was there.
Oh, okay.
Nor'easter came through in March. building blew up and caught fire, was destroyed.
Wow.
We built this building. But this building, 2 stories, they've opened it up to the community. They've had 9/11 services there. They've had the school next door uses the facility for the Christmas program, and it's just been a wonderful, very, very high-tech with state-of-the-art audiovisual stuff, which I'm sure you could appreciate. That really has been an outreach to the community. Everybody that walks in just says thank you so much for thinking about the community while you built your own church facility, and that's been special.
So the uniqueness of it was that they had the community in mind.
Yes, from the very, very beginning.
Yeah, I'll never forget, real quick, the Catholic church in our town, they built a huge church, and they built all these conference rooms and all space, and the pastor gave me a tour of the facility one day, and he said, and I said, boy, you have a lot of meetings here. He goes, no, we built all those conference rooms for community. Anybody in the community can come in and use the church free of charge.
Great idea.
And I thought it was a great idea. Very good. You're listening to Tandem Radio Live today with David and Jason Bossart of Bossart Builders, and boy, we're learning a lot of stuff today. So keep tuned in, and we have a lot more for you after the break. And remember, tandemradio.com. Please check that out, tandemradio.com. Just a great resource with some powerful information in it, and info at tandemradio.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you need to reach the Bossarts, you can reach them there as well. Info at tandemradio.com. We'll make sure they get your questions also. So we'll see you back right after this break. Listen close. These are great people that could help your business. Welcome back to Tandem Radio Live, and our theme today is building with integrity, and the scriptures that came to me this week are Exodus 31:6. Moreover, I have appointed Oholiab, son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan, to help him. Also, I have given ability to all the skilled workers to make everything I have commanded you. I love that part because it shows that God cares about the work that people are doing. He actually gives them the ability to do the skilled work. And Psalms 127:1, unless the Lord builds the house, the builder labors in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. I think that hits right to the crux of why I invited the Bossarts in today, because they have a heart for what they do, and they're not just doing it for the money. They realize there's a bigger picture here, and I know that you guys do this as unto the Lord. Matthew 24:1-2, Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. Do you see all these things? The disciples said. Truly I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. I think that's so important to wrap up with. We're going to talk about more of that in a minute, because we can talk about all these grand buildings, right? We talk about all these beautiful architecture. We talk about you wanting to go to Armenia to see some of those old churches, which there are some unbelievable churches there. And but it all comes down to God, right? So all that stuff's going to be torn down someday, and it's all going to come back. But for right now, you guys are right on track doing these things. Let's talk about, real quick, because we've got a lot to pack into this segment, value control you mentioned, all right? I think, Jason, we were talking on the break, and I think it's so important to look at how these projects go, how they can get out of control very easily, right? And that's why they have construction management. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, as a church that's, a church or anybody, any business owner that's looking to expand their facility, it's so important to keep, to still have a semblance of control of the project. Mm-hmm. And that starts very, very early. Right. Oftentimes the best move that is usually missed is when someone's looking to expand, they fail to talk to a builder about building costs first. They run right away to get plans drawn up. Right. And they get a wish list done, and the plan looks beautiful, and everything looks great. They hire an attorney, and they go to the board meeting, and they get this building approved. Right. Then they get the price back after it's approved, and it's $1 million, $2 million more they can afford. Right. Well, now they've lost control of their building. They have to do something completely different, but their expectations are up here. Right. So we really encourage churches in a construction management model, fits well, is to control the project from the beginning. We allow the churches to control the money. We help them with the plan so it never gets spirals out of control. And we also show them where we are at during the process. So if there's a little bit of money here, they can maybe spend a little bit more somewhere else. Right. But ultimately, it's the building that they really want in the end and that they have input in. And it's so, so important because once you lose control, it's very, very hard to get it back. And that's when you see these projects that go $1 million over budget, right, or all the horror stories that are out there. Or remain undone, right? Or remain completely undone, yeah. And then you've really got an upset congregation. Sure. Congregation. And, it's funny because that carries through in every segment. I always tell my clients, and the key, I think, to that is getting in early enough, right? I mean, I always tell my clients, a lot of times sound and video in my industry is an afterthought, They go, oh, by the way, we need a sound system, And what does that do to them? It limits what I can really do for them, just like for you. I mean, if the foundation is poor, you guys got some limits now, right? So
I always encourage churches, and that's why it's perfect to call someone like you very early on, right? I mean, they have some concepts in mind. They should be calling somebody like yourselves and saying, hey, let's talk about these ideas before we get it on paper, right?
Absolutely right. It'll save. Those are the churches that we're able to help the most, the ones that call us first, and we are able to steer them, not to what we want to build, to what they want to build, but we can at least tell them, hey, listen, this will cost this, that will cost that.
Right.
And it really helps them from an early stage.
Yeah. Well, I'm intrigued about a lot of the things we've talked about, but I also wanted to throw out to you, David, another maybe unique project you could tell us about, because I've seen some of your photos, your literature is beautiful, and I know you guys have done a lot of work. You mentioned 50 churches. What's another unique project? We talked about the AG Church. What's something else that comes to mind that was very unique for you?
Well, Princeton Presbyterian was, and it was created by the original design was an architect in Princeton that did a very creative design. However, the cost was designed with steel and masonry was very costly. We were able to come in and do value engineering. We actually converted it to wood systems and wood laminate beams, provided and designed by Barden, and they were able to save over $1 million on that budget by doing that. So we were very pleased to be able to make that a feasible project so they could go forward and build it. It was built last Easter. They had their dedication, and it was recently featured in a national magazine.
Well, excuse my ignorance, but wood's cheaper to build with than steel?
Yes, and it has been for a while. The steel and steel prices have fluctuated dramatically because it was become a world market. China was competing for a lot of concrete and steel in recent years, and that really pumped up the cost of that. Now, and steel fluctuated, went back down, but wood is more of a constant cost, more of a reliable system to use.
Well, it's interesting to know, because I would, again, maybe I'm ignorant, but I would imagine it would be the other way around, but that's great to know. There's a tip for you guys. If you're thinking of building a church, think wood, right? I mean, that's not always the answer, I know that, but consider it, right?
Well, we make sure that the churches have all the options. So it's whether it's steel, we'll look at all of the options and then try to find the one that fits their idea the best, that'll save them the most amount of money.
But there's a good example. Like I might come into a church project thinking, I'd love to have wood in here, but you know what, we won't consider it because I'm sure wood's expensive, and not even think of that, right? But then you come to the table and say, well, if you really want wood, this is what's going to cost, and we really want steel, this is what's going to cost. So I think that's powerful.
Yeah, we're constantly on the trends, looking at cost manuals and in touch with our tradespeople, so we know. I mean, it might be at a time where steel could be less expensive, but it's we're always watching that, and that's what we provide, for our customers, is that awareness and knowledge. Princeton also, the function of the building was to have the largest stage platform in Mercer County, and they opened it up to the performing arts, and they've recently had the Westminster Choir there, the New Brunswick Orchestra, and again, here you're seeing that it was very fulfilling to see that we were able to come up with a budget so they could build the building, and they were able to reach out to the community. They felt that having performing arts and different concerts there, people who would never go to a church would come to that kind of a function, and it really was an outreach to the community in that way.
That's great. A quick question for you. Did they send you running around with a tape measure to measure every stage in the county?
No, we understand that from the past, it is the largest performing stage in Mercer County.
Okay. I mean, that's a great way to bring people in. It really is. I love to hear those things because I always, when I get to speak to our church or even occasionally when I preach, I love to tell people to turn it inside out. You know what I mean? And you just got to really, how do we get the community to come to us, And I know you got to go out to the community, but what can you open the doors to? And there's a powerful example of being all things. And there's a whole other topic. I don't want to get off on it, but I think years ago the church was the community. Where today that's changed so much, and the government got involved and all kinds of things. But that's another topic. But it's just amazing. Good.
We're actually working with another church that is looking. They're going to build their multi-purpose building, so they'll have their Sunday services in it. But it's also going to double as a roller rink. I felt that was also a ministry outreach to get the youth
I love
in
that.
the area to come in and do roller skating.
Well, I want to talk to you more about that project. So, real quick, because we're running up on the break already, believe it or not. You're funny. You had a funny story for us. I know you said you wanted to share.
It was a number of years ago, and we were called in to work with a church in Manville, and they needed to design a new church because their church had burned down. And it was sad, but God comes in and rebuilds and opens a new door. The pastor of that church was, I believe she was the only woman that was allowed in the prisons of Somerset County. And she was very a dynamic, charismatic type of preacher and leader and pastor. And she said to me at one point in the design, I got to have floors that are jump-proof. I said, what do you mean jump-proof? So, we're a lot of heavy-set people. We like to eat and we like to jump because we're Pentecostal.
Jump-proof floors.
So we made those beams 3 foot thick to make sure that nothing collapsed.
That's a great one. I'm sure you must get a lot of unique requests, but that's a funny one. So jump-proof, I have to remember that. So I guess you have to figure out how charismatic the church is going to be to decide what kind of support you're going to put in, right?
Also, an illustration, every church is different.
Yeah, exactly.
Live load.
There you go, live
load.
I hear you. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for coming in this morning. I know you had quite a ride this morning to get here, and really appreciate it. I know our audience got a lot out of what you had to say. And I also know there's a lot more we could be talking about, so maybe you'll be kind enough to come in again in the future and talk more about that.
Certainly appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. David and Jason Bossart of Bossart Builders, and focused on the church industry. And if you have a church out there, get to their website at bossartbuilders.com, bossartbuilders.com, and I'm sure they can help you out. And check us out at tandemradio.com. Tandemradio.com has some really good stuff in there. If you want to see what Jason and David look like, you can even see their video next week when we get it up there. And, of course, info at tandemradio.com is an important place for you. If you're in business or you're thinking about being in business or have questions about business, whether you're in church business or what, we'd love to hear from you. Info at tandemradio.com. We're here every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the 6 FM stations of the Bridge, as well as the Internet and on apps as well. So you have a blessed weekend. God bless you in all you do, and we'll see you next Saturday.